By standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to thank you all for coming. The moderator has asked that I extend his apologies. He planned on attending tonight, but he is not feeling well. But at least he was thoughtful enough not to spread it to all of us. So a little bit about how this all began. I attended a town clerk's conference in May of 2016, and General Code was there, and they had done a presentation on the codifications of bylaws. So I had talked to the different town clerks who had had this done, and they were all very pleased with the process. I thought it would be great to get all of our bylaws in order, make sure there was no conflict, and make sure that all the bylaws were up to date with the current laws. And so to start us off with where we are now, Town Attorney Tom Harrington.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to stand up and be over here just so I'm not taking your focus away. But again, so Tom Harrington, Town Council. I started in Templeton last April timeframe. And one of the first things that Carter and Carol and I talked about was the Templeton Code update. And I am actually a big fan of this process. When you work with bylaw over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20 years, everything gets adopted slightly differently, different time, different authors. Occasionally you get a bylaw and you want to change it stylistically, but town meeting wants to see it that way. So a zoning and general bylaw can turn into a bit of a camel with different parts that don't really match. So it's important, every 20 or so years to go through this process and make everything stylistically similar so that those using the code are seeing the same language over and over again. That we eliminate whatever errors can develop from one version to the next. And statutes change, statutes come and go, and so it's important to make sure that we're referencing the right statute. And that's important, A, for our users, because we need to give them the best information, and B, selfishly, for those of us that might have to defend these bylaws in court. The last thing we want is a bad citation or an old citation, or to explain to a judge why we're citing a law that no longer exists. So I kudos to the town for starting this process. I'm happy that they did. And so our role in this has been the general code company. We send the bylaws to them. They put them into their own format, and then they go through it and make a series of changes, and they did an excellent job. And then it's our job to come in after them and make sure that we agree with the changes they make and catch some of the things that they might have missed or that they're not designed to catch. So let me take you through that process. Next. Okay, so let me tell you how at least I'm proposing that we do this at town meeting this spring. And let me insert there, this process is very helpful for me. I'm going to have to defend these bylaws at town meeting in the spring. And if there's any, if anyone has any problems with any of the changes or has any concerns with them, much better that we hear about them now or before town meeting rather than on town meeting floor. It's hard to be nimble and accurate on town meeting floor, but with a little time to think about it and consider concerns, I think we're all in a much better place. Okay, so with that said, there's kind of two phases to this. There's new bylaws, and then there's the adoption of the code. And we proposed doing it this way because the way the code update was explained to the town was that it was really just cleanup, catch spelling errors, catch punctuation errors, bad citation, that sort of thing. But we weren't going to change anything. And if we were going to change something, we wanted to do it ahead of time in a different format so that so that town meeting knows what's going on. So we've identified what are either new or changed, where we wanted to change it significantly enough that we thought it was worth pulling out of the code. How this would work at town meeting is, my proposal would be that town meeting address these bylaws: the trench bylaw, non-criminal disposition bylaw, an AgCom bylaw, a wireless communications bylaw, marijuana open container bylaw, and a jailbreak bylaw. We address those before we get to the code, so that we know if they're thumbs up or thumbs down. If they're, let's assume positively that they're all thumbs up, the town votes for all 6 of them, we'll then offer a version of the code that will delete the current version of each of those, okay? If, for instance, the wireless communication bylaw is defeated, then the code will have the current version of the wireless bylaw. So, again, we wanna make sure that we know what town meeting is willing to change on this scale first. Once we know the answer to all those, we'll have we'll know what version of the code to put up there. Okay, so I've listed them all, and then we're gonna have a slide for each one, right? Okay, so, and then to go back, so for the code changes, what you're gonna see primarily is punctuation and spelling changes, corrections, consistency, edits, updated fee amounts, and by the way, some of our fees were, really old and not, when we set a fee, we want it to more or less approximate the service that the person receives for the fee and the cost that the town incurs when it does whatever the fee asks for, issues a permit, whatever. And so we needed to change some of those. There was a bunch of outdated terms. There was some stuff we just needed to delete. It was said twice or was repetitive. There was some policy conflicts that we addressed, and then of course statutory changes. One of the big things that you may have heard about was the Municipal Modernization Act passed in 2016, where the legislature made innumerable changes to statutes that affect towns. Most of them for the better, but many of them changed citations that we're dealing with, so that was important too. Okay, new bylaws. Okay, the first one is the trench bylaw. So the trench bylaw, and does everyone have a handout from up here? And I guess we'll post this on the web too.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so the trench bylaw was originally passed in 2015, and I think it came out of a law that was passed at the state that required us to put certain safety barriers around trenches. Nevertheless, we passed it. When we sent all our bylaws to the Attorney General, yeah?
Is this gonna be a presentation that you give on town meeting floor, by any chance?
I would not, I hope not.
For the public's, because this is being recorded, AG, that could be agricultural, that could be.
Oh, okay.
You're using acronyms that we might use every day, but the public doesn't use, so
Oh,
could you
thank you.
please clarify that?
You bet.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so trench bylaw was originally passed in 2015. Whenever we pass a bylaw, we send it to the Attorney General's office, which is AG on this slide. The Attorney General's office must approve our bylaw before we can actually enforce it. So the AG did pass our bylaw, but had a series of concerns with some of the wording of our bylaw. So we've not inserted it in the code until we had the chance to make these changes. And so the changes are in your handout, and they are in blue, and they deal with waiving permit fees. We had something that was a little overzealous in our ability to waive permit fees, and the AG didn't like that. So we had to tailor that down to say that permit fees may be waived for projects that serve a public interest. Skipping ahead to section 3, deposit forfeiture. So there's a deposit involved with this permit, And if someone's gonna forfeit it, the AG wanted to make sure that they had certain, for lack of a better term, due process rights, to make sure that they were covered before, and they had a right to, participate in the process before their deposit was forfeited. So the AG wanted to see these. We're going to, so we included them in this handout. They'll appear as a separate warrant article, again, because we felt there's enough of a change here that it doesn't fall under punctuation, spelling errors, that sort of thing. So this will be a standalone bylaw amendment at town meeting. And so I've referred to this as the first one, so I'm not sure where we're gonna put it in the warrant vis-a-vis with budget items, but say it was going to start with the number 10, this would be article number 10. We'd get an up or a down vote, and then we proceed to article number 11, which would be the non-criminal disposition bylaw. Yep.
Sorry.
No, you know what, this is really helpful, so please, fire away.
So I'm gonna be, part of the public.
Yep.
Since there's just me and the chief and the advisory committee. When this gets posted online, will this be in color or only in black and white? Because since Miss Attorney Harrington addressed the color blue, I wanna make sure that the public can see the color blue.
So,
Otherwise, the public is not gonna know what Attorney Harrington is discussing.
so, let me speak briefly to the process we wanna follow between now and town meeting. We have the meeting tonight. We'll be asking Tom just to quickly go through the PowerPoint and make sure AG is Attorney General, and some of the lingo is more
PowerPoint will be
citizen
on the website?
speak, so that the PowerPoint can be up on the website.
Oh, all
Okay?
right.
And then, can I just see it quickly?
Absolutely.
So the PDF we sent you,
So
it is blue.
Okay,
It's
so
the same color.
The PDF that they send us will show colors, and it's underlined here. So that will go up on the web in color as well.
Okay.
And in the
Uh,
same color I'm referring to. It
And in
should-
the color he's,
should read just the
Okay, I
same
just
way
wanna
this
make
does.
sure that
Yep.
everything
Excellent point.
corresponds
Yeah.
and that the public is
that's,
not confused.
that's our intent,
Okay,
based upon any comments we get tonight, over the next week. Tom and Katie will do, sort of the next round to accommodate any of those. And then we'll have another public hearing at some point, when it makes sense, late February. And if we need a third one, we will. And that's just the best I can tell you right now.
perhaps there could be, some questions, sent in and it could be a talk of the town,
Sure.
maybe in place of,
Yep.
a public hearing,
Yep, we can do that.
but just a suggestion.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, and, so again, please, public and everyone in the room, read this with a critical eye. Let us know if you don't see anything that looks quite right. It's easy to make changes ahead of time and everyone can think about them.
Instead of on town
And-
meeting floor.
Right, and the more eyes on this, the better. I am not the last word on any of this stuff.
Mhm.
So, any help I can get, I will happily take.
Can I just speak
Yeah.
to one thing quickly? Not on town meeting floor, and that's really very critical.
I did say not on town.
Yeah,
meeting.
and
Oh.
that's really very critical, because some of the issues that are being dealt with in the change are changes that were made on town meeting floor on the fly, and left you with some things that we now have to go back and plug back in, because it wasn't the intent of people to delete a section, but by giving it the same number as a section that existed,
It
at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it accidentally
Right.
took things out.
Right.
So we are having this meeting tonight, and that's why the codification has been up for 2 weeks now. And these folks have been working hard to try to make sure this is out there, so we can try to avoid those errors that can happen on the town meeting floor. Thank you, Tom, sorry for.
Okay, so non-criminal disposition bylaws. So, this is one where we thought it could be clearer. And if you look at the non-criminal disposition bylaw in the package, which is the second bylaw.
I'm sorry, it would also help if this could be paginated.
That's a great idea.
in the PowerPoint, if it could address what page it's on.
Okay. So the key, so I think one of the keys to it is this non-criminal disposition means it allows us to collect fines through a court process without going through the criminal process, because typically, when you go to collect a fine, if you find someone, they don't pay it, in the past, you went to criminal court to enforce that fine. We now have this process, which is non-criminal, which allows us to go to see a civil clerk, which is a much easier process. But it's important that the town knows their responsibilities and what they're going to be fined for. And so the way it was written before was each section would say, these are the fines. And what we wanted to do was pull all the fines into one section so that everyone knows all the fines for non-criminal disposition are in one location. So that's what we did. And hopefully that makes it easier for the reader to use. And we updated several of the fines to kind of more current amounts. So that was that change. And the next one is a request from the Agricultural Commission. So, we have an Agricultural Commission. We have not adopted Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 8, which is what I would call the Agricultural Commission statute. This would allow, so this kind of, I think, gives them a framework to work from. I would consider this bylaw to be aspirational, so it's what they aspire to. It's how they want farms to be treated in town. I don't think there's a lot of specific authority built in, other than a framework of how they're supposed to operate. And this was a request that just came in about 3 weeks ago, I believe.
Yeah.
And so we added it as a standalone warrant article. And again, so the version that goes up of the PowerPoint, we'll send you a new version with this, with page numbers, and then we'll include what page in the handout one should refer to if they want to see this bylaw. Okay. Yep.
So will you be changing the title to add statute, Agricultural Commission statute? Or did you just use that as language?
I can do that.
Are
Well,
you,
no,
are you
I'm-
looking in the, okay.
I can't give you, it says Article 20, or amend bylaws, RE adoption, Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 8L, Agricultural Commission, but you used statute?
Yeah.
You used, are you adding that word, statute?
So that part up top, that in the bold,
Yeah?
would not go into your bylaw. That's part of that's kind of the heading for the warrant article.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
And that's okay, it's a good question, and maybe we'll put a little more, since these will all appear as warrant articles, maybe I'll put them in a little tighter warrant article format, so people will know what they're gonna see when they get to town meeting.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Katie.
Okay, the next one is the wireless communications facilities and towers. Okay, so, nope. Okay, so currently, we have a wireless communications bylaw, and it is a general bylaw, not a zoning bylaw. And I was, this one was actually, I was surprised, I have never seen a general wireless communications bylaw. And so this is on my motion to move it from the general bylaws to the zoning bylaws. And this one falls under the heading, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. What you have in your general bylaw is a zoning bylaw. It refers to the planning board, it refers to the issuance of a special permit, it cites Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, which is the zoning act. And so, my concern is, if someone comes in to construct a cell tower in town, there's not much we can do, much of that law has been ceded to the providers. We have some authority, but not a lot of authority. But if that authority is in a general bylaw, not a zoning bylaw, I'm concerned that an applicant who was not interested in going through the town process might try to find a way around it. So this is much better in zoning, and if anyone has a concern with this, I'd be happy to talk to them about it. But in my opinion, this is an important thing to do to maintain what authority we have over wireless communications facilities. Next one. Okay, so now we're getting into two new bylaws that were proposed by our chief of police. And so this first one allows the chief to enforce kind of an open container theory of marijuana in a car. Because, we treat marijuana differently now, and it's much more akin to alcohol than to an illegal substance. And so it's important that we amend our processes to address it. Chief, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, if you review the marijuana law from the state, this mirrors their section of the state law.
It does.
And also what it does is, if you saw the Marijuana Commission just put out last week recommendations on how we should be moving forward on enforcing marijuana, especially within an open container within a motor vehicle, this is one of their primary topics that they had put forward.
Recommendations, yeah.
Recommendations.
Yeah. So again, this wasn't my idea, this was the chief's idea. I think it's a great idea, and I appreciate him being proactive on this and picking up the version of the code, taking a look at it, and letting us know that it didn't have all the tools he wanted in it, and so we've added this. So I'm pleased with this. Yeah.
Since this section is new, is this fine put into where you had placed all the fines?
We did, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and so then the last one is the Jake break bylaw. So again, kudos to the chief for being proactive and identifying a problem. And so I'll describe the problem, and if I go wrong, please jump in, but there's a sand and gravel pit in East Templeton,
Yes.
and downward slope, many trucks, at least 100 a day?
More, I would imagine.
Okay.
Quite a
Okay.
Yes, chief?
It's quite a
Okay, so lots. And too many of them are using jake braking, which is using the engine to slow the truck down. And that makes a lot of noise, particularly because these roads are through a residential neighborhood. So this bylaw allows us to prohibit jake braking throughout town. A little bit of a head scratcher for me, but other towns have done it. So this is the first time I've heard of it, but other towns have done it. The Attorney General has approved it in other towns, so we've adopted it across town. So jake braking is prohibited across town if town meeting votes for it. Is that a good explanation?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that, chief.
And, okay, so that concludes all the new bylaws, all the bylaws that we think, two new, others just changed, but we think are worthy of separate consideration. Partly because we don't wanna get onto town meeting floor and have people say, this is more than a punctuation change, this is more than a typo, you're doing more here. We are doing more here, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot, but we are doing more here. Fair point. Let's pull them out of the code and let's address them one at a time. So I'm gonna optimistically assume we made it through all of those, and now we're on to the code changes. So I'm not gonna go through the code changes, there's hundreds of them, but we've identified 10 or 15 groups that we think that changes fall into it. But if anyone has any specific questions about a specific change, we would love to hear from you on those. If something seems out of whack to anyone here or at home and wants to raise it, please let us know. We'd love to address it ahead of time. Okay, so these are examples of the changes. And again, so these were basically found by the code service. This is what we're paying the code service to do, and I think they did do a good job. And there were a number of them, but so to start with, we corrected a number of small numeral changes, spelling or similar errors. These are examples where, changing oneth to one, changing the to this, changing born to born, changed commas to semicolons. My favorite, changing inshore to ensure, and then adding the word the before certain agencies. So just making it grammatically correct. And I'll tell you, when in court, when you have a bylaw that is not grammatically correct, you know lawyers, they all try to drive a truck through a misspelling. So I hope this gives everyone at home the comfort that it gives me. Okay. Okay, so there was a number of misnamed town departments, and maybe maybe at one time it was the Recreation Committee and went to Commission. I don't know, but it's the Commission now, so let's make sure we're citing it accurately. Next. So this is kind of the real hobgoblin here, is consistency. You refer to it as the Board of Selectmen in Section 1 and the Selectmen in Section 2, and the Select Board in Section 3, and so we've gone through and tried to make it consistent so that the first reference is always to, if it's the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Selectmen, if it's the Zoning Board of Appeals, it's the Zoning Board of Appeals, and thereafter refer to it as the board. So that section will start off with the full name and then be referred to as the board until we hit the next section. Again, several fee amounts were, not really even enough to repay the town for the effort it has to go into for issuing a penalty. And so, again, so 20 to 300. Again, we don't have to fine someone $300. We can fine someone up to $300. And for egregious activities, sometimes that'll get us the reaction we're looking for. When the top fine is $20, sometimes you don't always get the reaction you're looking for, and you end up sending out fine slips every day, right? And so it can cost the town $10 to send out a $20 fine ticket on a daily basis, and so it didn't make sense. Okay, terms and definitions. We updated or removed outdated terms in order to provide greater clarity. We had a section on automatic amusement devices, which I think when that definition was adopted, it was like pre-video games. So they were basically referring to pool tables. So we know we have different automatic amusement devices now, so we tried to incorporate more of those. Okay, so deletions, outdated, obsolete, and sometimes entire bylaws. For instance, we had a solid waste bylaw which regulated our use of the town dump, which we've learned no longer exists, so let's not regulate what we don't have. And again, the concern there can be, someone says we have a bylaw, so I have a dump. And it's not likely, but if we don't have one, let's not regulate it. again, 240-6, language prohibiting illegal sewer hookups, was deleted just because it was covered in two places and it made it confusing. We updated definitions of campground, flea market, farm stand, funeral home, et cetera. No, I'm sorry, we deleted those, because they're no longer, we had definitions for them, but they were never addressed within the bylaw. So at some point they must have been, but those probably got deleted, along the way, but definitions were not deleted, so that makes it clean, yeah.
So, Tom, for those here, chapter 300 is the zoning
Yeah.
bylaws. And the planning board will have to have, in addition to what you're doing with codification, some hearings of their own on the wireless bylaw in some of these. Is that,
That is
am I
cor-
correct?
That is correct, and so, note to self, let's change chapter 300 to zoning bylaw. So it's not so inside baseball, but yes, so the process is different to change a zoning bylaw and to change a general bylaw. General bylaw, you go to town meeting, make the change, you're good. A zoning bylaw, we need to send notice to the planning board, and then the planning board will hold a hearing. So they're gonna have to hold a hearing not only on the wireless,
But on this
you know,
one as well.
moving wireless telecommunications to the zoning bylaw, but also each and every little nitpicky correction that was made in the zoning bylaw.
And you'll prepare that notice for us, and we can get that off to them in a timely manner?
We will, yeah, we'll get right on that. Maybe wait a few days just to see
Yeah,
if we get
yeah,
any comments and then.
yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, so that'll be the process there. Policy conflicts, we also harmonized two bylaws with existing town policy or practice. One was deleting provisions for sick leave and compensation because the substance of this bylaw is really captured in the town's personnel policy. And two, we edited to reflect the fact that the chief of police or designee, not the board of assessors, assigns or reassigns address numbers, which, again, small point, but if we ever get in a fight over that, we wanna make sure that we're accurately reflecting what's going on.
And that's the actual practice that's been in place
Right.
for how long now, chief?
As long as I can remember.
Since E911, basically?
Yeah, since E911 came in and we
Had to do the whole renumbering,
all the streets and
Yep.
did all the renumbering.
Yeah.
so a good 15 plus, easily.
I'd say like 23.
20.
I was gonna say that too, that's
Okay.
definitely
23 years.
mid-nineties.
It's mid, okay.
Okay. Okay, so statutory changes, where a major shift in state law has taken place since the bylaw was written, we have made the appropriate changes, and will submit to town meeting at a separate motion. So this was the ones we addressed first, non-criminal disposition, the trench bylaw, some of those that had statutory changes that we needed to, address outside of the code update. And the minor updates based on changes in state law, just deleting citations to repealed statutes, revising the interest rate on unpaid water and sewer bills, from 1% to the statutorily authorized 14%. You know, just kind of reflecting the current version of statutes to make sure that we're up to date. Yep.
May I ask Carter if you know if they're practicing that?
I do not know the answer to that, but we'll get you an
Okay.
answer.
Thank you.
And I think that concludes my presentation on the code update. Does anyone have any questions or topics to discuss? Yeah?
I just wanted to ask, what company is it that does the code updates?
General code,
General code.
That's all. Thanks.
good question. Anything else?
I don't think you want any more questions.
I do.
No, I think this is excellent.
Okay.
I asked all my questions during, if I was supposed to save them towards the end, I'm sorry.
No, I am absolutely, let's do this as we go along, otherwise I forget what I said.
I'm a good proofreader, so I didn't realize, or I had forgotten that you had posted it on the web, but I can't do it that way. I need paper in order to proofread, so I need to know where to find the paper.
We'll get those select board printed out.
I know it's probably a lot,
It's
right?
a couple hundred pages.
If there's just one that we could come in and
I
browse at our
think
leisure?
we have one in the select board,
Okay, well, I
and we
can
have one
come
in
in
your
and do that
office,
myself.
and we have one in Carol's
I'll come in.
office as well. I don't recall if we put one up at the library, but I think after the next round, I will do that. I'll make sure there's 3
I'll come in here. and
paper
do it.
copies out there.
Oh, but I would rather, you don't want me to write in it though, do you?
I can replace pages, or you can copy the page you wanna write something
Or
on.
I'll figure out how
Yeah,
I
not
can
to
make
worry.
notes for you
Not-
if I
not-
have
not
any.
to worry.
That would really be appreciated. You know,
Okay.
Again, the more eyes we have on this, the better.
Okay, I'll figure something out with Carter.
There is one bylaw that's been the subject of some interest. We did have the proposed bylaws to the advisory committee at the Maytown meeting. That's, hasn't really moved until as of late. We spent some time with the advisory committee 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
And I reviewed with them what the motivations had been behind some of those changes. I know that they, Tony DeJoy, I provided him with the marked up version, and they'd started a draft. So I am hopeful that we can come to agree upon a single document over the next 3 or 4 weeks, so that the select board doesn't have to go it alone again. So that is still sort of an unanswered question out there. Over the next week or two, again, if people have comments, they can email them to me, town administrator at moultonborough.nh.gov. Is it town clerk?
Town
What
clerk.
was your email address?
Town administrator at templeton1.org.
Thank you.
We haven't made the change yet. That's town clerk at templeton1.org. Sorry, the change we're making had seeped into my head. And we'll get those off to Tom, and that'll provide a nice tracking system. And when we've made whatever the change is, he can advise us so we can let the person out there know. And it doesn't have to be you should change to this, to that. It can just be a question of, what does section X mean? What is the impact of this
Absolutely.
change?
Yeah.
So we can get folks answers. And then, at some point over the next couple of weeks, we'll issue a new draft. We'll have these things up on the web, and then we'll schedule another appropriate forum of some sort. Yes, we want to do this as much as possible. I also like to minimize the budget as much as possible. No offense.
None taken.
But that's kind of where we're at this point. Carol?
Yeah, I agree. Any questions, any comments are greatly appreciated, and I think you did a great job.
I can say too that the board, there are other means of, a lot of people contact me via social media, or they don't use my email, but I'm happy to, if you send me a question or want to talk to me, or people have my cell phone, I can get them to Carter or Carol. I won't answer them necessarily, but I'm happy to be a go-between, anything that people need in order to get this process done, not on town meeting floor.
Yeah, the more points of contact, the better. Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you, great job.
Thanks, Tom.
Sure.
Thanks for coming.
Chance, and you got the two of them here. Any other questions? You got the two folks who are toiling in the vineyards here to answer the questions.
No, I don't
I
have
thought
any.
there'd be
It's
more
pretty
of us
clear,
too,
pretty
but
straightforward.
We're meeting again on Thursday, so.
The story's mostly gonna be
They
letting
all
people
have-
know that they can
they
see this
all
kind of
have
stuff in the
something
coming
else
weeks,
they
and
can
that
do.
you guys are, if they have questions,
Yep.
to you, so.
Tony does the, on the school.
That's Thursday.
Right.
I'm on that now.
No, but you know what I'm saying, like they all have
Yeah.
a different meeting that they're
I know, I have
committed
a
to
meeting
at some
every
other
night this
point.
week.
Yeah, so,
No, but this
kind of, I mean, the historical society is just once a month, so.